So I'm gonna go ahead and restart my nightly commute, and the subject of this commute is gonna be the Lyric Graffiti update, pretty much, because they did respond to some of my questions, and they also defended themselves, of course, too, which I expected actually already. So here's the problem I have with the Lyric Graffiti, pretty much. It's not the bike itself, because as I said in my first video, I'm actually happy if they do, you know, bike that could pretty much outperform the Super 73 and stuff like that, especially at the price point. I always thought the price point was actually pretty good. So here I'm gonna go through traffic to get through this. Here I gotta pay attention because there's actually slush and everything on the ground though. But the problem I was having with it pretty much was that the battery that they stated in my earlier video, I made a mistake and said it could be 17 amp hour. It is definitely a 17.5 amp hour because they're using Samsung 35Es, which I'm very familiar with, and they're 3500 milliamp hours each cell. So in a 5P configuration, it would be 17.5 amp hour pretty much, since they could do 3.5 amp hour each cell, of course. So I'm not even going to dispute that. It can definitely do the 17.5 amp hour because that's what the cells are rated for nominally. The problem I have with it though is that they decided to do 18650. No, that's not me making that noise, that's actually a car behind me. But the problem I'm having with it pretty much is the fact that they went ahead and used those Samsung 35Es when they could have just went 21700s, for example, and was able to get more current out of it. The thing about the Samsung 35Es pretty much is they can only really do, even though they're rated at about 40 amp continuous and stuff like that. I noticed when I done my builds with those cells, at least I'm going from my experience now, they can have actually have problem with voltage sag and all that other stuff when you start trying to push them past 30 amps. So they're really only good for about 30 amp continuous and stuff like that, if you don't want the controller cutting out and everything else and getting your full capacity out of those cells, and for the longevity of the cells themselves. So that's one problem I have with the Lyric Graffiti, is the battery's actually just plain and simple, it's underpowered pretty much, you know what I mean? It's not able to push out the nominal current of 50 amps like they claim it will, you know what I mean? Even though, yeah, you can mess with phase current and stuff, and I'll get to that in a whole nother video when I go ahead and do the actual Super 73 clone, the 3000 watt build. But you know, the battery pack still got to be up to task of being able to put out that current that they're gonna say that this bike's gonna be able to push out, you know, so you could actually get the true 2500 watt nominal without no problem. Of course, the battery pack is able to actually deliver that, you know. And that's where I had the problem with the Lyric Graffiti, is the battery pack is very lacking. They're still using 18650s when everyone else pretty much moved away from there and now using 21700s and stuff like that, obviously because more current capability and stuff. And here's where I gotta be very careful because you can easily slip on something like that. Problem with riding in snow is when you ride on something like that, you know, when it's packed in, you could easily slip on it, versus where it's unpacked, you can just plow right through it pretty much. So you got to be very careful with those. But that's my issue with the Lyric Graffiti pretty much, is that they go ahead and claim it's 2500 watt nominal, and yeah, the motor and controller is definitely probably capable of doing it. I'm not gonna say that, even though I did state that the motor does look smallish for a 2500 watt nominal motor and stuff like that. You never know, it could actually be a 2500 watt motor. I haven't seen the actual bike in person myself because there's no production bike available yet. So obviously no one's received this except for reviewers and stuff that did a quick test, and they only had the bike for a day and stuff like that to do the actual reviews. So there's no telling that. I'm not going to dispute that the motor isn't, you know, a real 2500 watt nominal motor, and the controller, being the fact it's an ASI, is probably gonna be able to push it, because those are actually very good controllers and stuff like that. There's no doubt about that. It's the battery that I have the issue with. Now the good thing about it is they actually did say what display they're using, and they're using the APT 860C, which is the color display, of course, and stuff like that. So that's the display you're gonna be getting instead of the egg rider display, which I assume they weren't gonna give you just the egg rider and stuff like that. So yeah, that's the display that they're actually gonna go ahead and provide, I guess, under production, but it's gonna be at 860C. So for those that want to know, yep, you're getting the APT 860C display, at least from what they said. So there you go, which is actually a very good display, by the way. And let me go and make sure, yeah, I got brights on, so let's go ahead. So that's the good news, they're giving you a good display. Me, I would buy the bike personally if it had two things: if it had rear suspension, and if it had 21700 cells, even if it was a 52 volt setup, at least then I know that battery pack will be able to go ahead and deliver the current it's supposed to be able to deliver, and it'll be no problem. Obviously, as they pointed out, the higher voltage you get, the higher top speed you get, of course, which is true. So, you know, if you're running a 72 volt or a 96 volt setup, obviously you get a higher top speed than you would out of a 52 or 48 volt setup, because as the voltage increases, your RPM on the motor increases, therefore you're gonna get a higher top speed. Wattage itself is more for torque. So, you know, let's just say, you know, you're getting a motor that's 2500 watts and you're pushing it at 2500 watts. Well, you're gonna get a lot of torque out, not necessarily top speed, where if you get the same 2500 watts of current, but now you're pushing it at 72 volts, then you get more low-end torque out of it. But I mean, not low-end torque, you get more top speed out of it, but the same amount of torque pretty much. So that's definitely true. The higher the voltage you get, the more top speed you get. The more current you get, the more low-end torque you'll get and stuff like that. So yeah, that is true. But like I said though, even with the 52 volt battery and a 2500 watt motor, that motor should still be able to do at least easily 40 miles an hour without hesitation, especially a guy that's only 190 pounds, is way lighter than me, because I've done builds that are 2500 watt to 3000 watt builds and stuff like that. I was easily able to get to 44, 45 miles per hour with no problem, and that's with my weight, and I'm a lot heavier than the guys in the video. But now we're going to talk about something else in here. At least I made those corrections to it. And we're talking about, of course, winter commuting and stuff like that. And one of the things, you know, that you got to be careful with when you're riding the winter and e-bike and stuff like that is packed snow. Loose snow is actually not such a problem, but the packed snow, one where, you know, people have stepped on and you got tire tracks on and stuff, that's the one that's actually gonna make you slip pretty much. You know what I mean? When you get loose snow, you can actually plow right through it, no problem normally, you know. But when it's packed in and stuff like that, and you got the unevenness, it's like riding it off-roading pretty much. And then if you got ice and stuff like that under it, then you can easily slip, of course. So it's one thing you gotta be careful with. The other thing too is when you're riding in the winter is how you use your brakes. You don't want to go ahead and, you know, slam on your front brakes, for example. You want to go ahead and use your rear more than anything when you have to stop and stuff like that, and just use your right brakes lightly pretty much, and you're not just gonna slam on it, otherwise you will fly over the handlebars essentially. You know what I mean? So it's one thing you gotta be careful of when you're winter commuting. Obviously when you're winter commuting like this, the night's even more trickier. You want to make sure you have a good light so you can be able to see everything that's in front of you, and any peaks and stuff that's coming up in the snow or ice and stuff like that, so you can see ahead of you and pretty much be able to avoid it and stuff like that. You don't want to go full speed riding at night and stuff like that. You want to kind of take it easy like I am right now, and then of course have your foot ready, so that way if by chance you could slip, you can kind of recover the bike as you're slipping and stuff like that. And it's one of those things you kind of got to learn how to handle the bike. It's not something that I could just tell you how to do it. You got to go out there and actually ride for yourself and practice and stuff like that, and do it at low speed, so if you fall, it's not a big deal, you know what I mean? Then eventually work your way up to higher speeds and stuff like that. And I'm actually still going faster than what most would during winter time. There's some people that won't even take it past 10 miles, but like this here, I mean, I could try it right now, but I already know like I ain't gonna get through this. And see, they're definitely not gonna get through this because, you know, the rear tires could slip out of it, you know what I mean? Because that's over 4 or 5 inches. You know, typically if it's only like 2 to 3 inches, you might be able to get through it no problem, but even then it can be tricky. It's just kind of, you know, you got to be prepared when you're riding in the winter and stuff like that, and you know, kind of take it easy, of course. And then now, as far as riding an all-wheel drive bike in the winter, it's actually even more difficult because when you got dual, you know, hub motors, for example, front, rear, and stuff like that. Oh, this is gonna be great. I'm gonna have to walk this over this one, huh? But, huh? And there you go. And there you go, we made it, huh? But yeah, that's one of the things you definitely got to be careful with when you're riding in the snow, is when you get a lot of packed snow like that, where for what they do is when they go ahead and plow the streets, they don't, you know, they push all the snow obviously to the side. And when you do that, and here you go. And yeah, like I said, 1-2 inches isn't a big deal. It's not gonna hurt. Kind of how you handle the bike more than anything, you know what I mean? It's more the dips that's gonna make you fall, pretty much. Just take it slow, nice and easy, and you'll be fine, pretty much. You know, when you've done it for years, it's kind of easy to. Now here's where it's gonna be a little bit more trickier, because obviously no one bothers shovel any of that, so I'm probably gonna have to walk that. Let's see if there's a place where we can jump it at least, you know, huh? Yeah, here we go. We can do it right here. And you know, this is real, so now you're actually seeing like what you kind of got to go through in riding snow. Now I could have probably ridden through that, but you can hear the rear tire kind of slipping, so I don't want to take a chance and mess up the bike, so I'm just taking it easy. But you know, you can kind of feel, and you kind of got to get the feel for it. It's pretty much what you got to do. If you feel your rear tire slipping a lot, you know what I mean, you don't want to go ahead and just plow right through it, because you will fall. I've done it, I know. I've done it once at least before. It's not fun when you fall, of course, especially if you're going higher speeds and stuff like that. But now we're in the safe zone. Now, as far as riding, back to the subject, riding a two-wheel drive bike, the problem is when you get a two-wheel drive where you get a front hub and a rear hub, your front's where you got to be able to keep traction, because your rear is always going to probably lose traction because your wheel's spinning out. Now when you go ahead and add a front motor to the equation, guess what's going to happen? Your front wheel is actually going to spin out too, and then if it spins out, of course, you're going to end up wiping out, you know what I mean? So that's why it's more on how you handle bikes. So now I'm not going to say no, having a two-wheel drive bike has its advantages in the winter, like deep snow like that and stuff. You actually be able to get better through, but it's how you handle the bike. And what I normally do when I get into tricky scenarios like that is sometimes I'll lean forward and I'll even almost stand up to a point so I can keep traction on that front wheel, and I'll handle the bike kind of aggressively to be able to get through that and stuff like that. Now anything that's like packed obviously 4 inches and higher, you're not gonna get through that, you know what I mean? You're gonna end up having to walk your bike and stuff like that, because even with real good tires, better than these, because these tires kind of actually suck as far as, you know, some other tires go, because there's some better tires you can get that'll be able to go through the snow even much better than these do, you know what I mean? You're still gonna end up potentially slipping and stuff like that, you know? So you just got to kind of be prepared for it, learn how to handle the bike and stuff. Like I said, this here because it's only an inch or two, it's not really a problem. Go to something that's a little bit thicker though, that's when you start running into problems. Typically on my mid-drive I can go through 3 inches of snow, no problem, you know, on my mid-drive, because the center of gravity is better. You don't got the motor spinning out in the back and stuff. You can actually have better traction on the rear and in the front, which is the reason why I like mid-drives, because mid-drives definitely do better when it's off-roading and when you're getting into snow and tricky scenarios and stuff like that, where hub drives, and it's not, I'm not saying anything bad about, you know, hub motors or anything like that, because hub motors are great actually. I'm just saying when it comes to as far as like dealing with snow and stuff, they'll tend to spin out and stuff like that because they lose traction. Then you got the power from the motor spinning the wheel, and the unsprung rate, as they call it, will also cause issues too and stuff like that, where you don't have those issues typically, you know, with a, you know, mid-drive motor. And here we're going about, you said, another inch of snow, and you know, going about 12-13 miles an hour, which is faster than what most people would go. It's no problem, you know. It's just when you start going, you know, to anything that's a little bit thicker that catches you off suppliers and stuff like that, that's when you can lose traction, and next thing you know, the bike's flying right under you pretty much. So just be careful pretty much. Another tip I could give you as far as riding this winter is definitely make sure you wipe down your bike and clean, because a lot of cities and stuff like that, and even a lot of rural areas and stuff, they'll use a lot of salt on the street and stuff like that and pour the salt down, and here you go, you got more than probably about and see, that's what you got to be careful with. But you know, I went ahead and turned the bike towards where it was a slip and was able to gain control again. But that's where you got to be careful when stuff like that catches you off surprise and stuff like that. And when you're dealing with a two-wheel drive, it gets even more complex than that, because now you got the front rotor, so you can't use the front to your advantage and stuff like that. Now here we're gonna have to walk it again, because who knows what this is. Try and tell him go, because I don't want him to wait for me to walk, you know? Alright, let's go ahead and get through this. But this is where it catches you surprise. That's why I hate packed in snow, because you get unevenness and stuff like that. Then it's easy to slip. The other thing too, like I said, is when you put your foot down, you gotta be careful with, you know, black ice and stuff like that, because your foot could slip right under you too and stuff. So you gotta make sure when you slow down, where and how you're slowing down. Brakes are becoming straight probably because there's snow packed into that motor now. But there you go, just take it nice, slow and easy, and you'll be fine. All that too, going slow also keeps the wind from affecting your hands and stuff like that as much, because the faster you go, the more wind you get on your hand. When you get more wind on your hand, it makes your hands freezes and becomes numb and stuff like that over time if you're going faster and stuff. So wintertime, just plan ahead, you know. Make sure you add, you know, like usually it takes me about 5-6 more minutes commuting, you know what I mean? So make sure you calculate the amount of time that you're gonna need to do your commute, of course, if you're going to work and stuff like that, so you can be able to have sufficient amount of time, you know, to ride your bike if you are planning on riding in the winter. Some people won't ride this at all, and they'll say hell no. But like I said, if you do proper maintenance on your bike and stuff like that, where you're actually wiping down the bike every day, you know, when you go and take a ride and stuff, wipe all the water and stuff off of it and stuff like that. And when you get home, clean your bike at least somewhat decent, like, you know, go ahead and wipe off everything off the bike first, obviously, and then go ahead and, you know, do a quick wash of your bike and stuff like that. And then, you know, go and put it up for a day, and then every once a week give your bike a very good cleaning. Go ahead and make sure your chain's degreased and re-lubed again and stuff, so it don't rust. You know what I mean? Your derailleur, obviously, or your sprocket, and then also, you know, your group set, pretty much all your group set, your rear and front. You want to go and make sure everything is up to pretty much, you know, it's re-oiled, grease. Also too, you want to go and make sure any frame parts and stuff like that is actually, you know, oil like any pivot points and stuff like that, and you got sufficient amount of grease. And long as you do that, your bike will stay in good condition, stuff like that, and won't oxidize or rust and stuff. So this pretty much ends the commute, and we'll go and talk about a different subject on the next commute.